Overall, the budget would decrease? No, it would increase federal spending on the 12 months starting in October to 6.8 trillion from the 6.2 trillion spent in the 2022 fiscal year. And don't forget, as many people know, 80% of all the money that's in circulation now was printed up over the past 3.5 to 4 years. All right, seal clap. I love it. All right, so let's head over to another story here. This one of a little lighter, although still bemusing note. And who didn't love the Goosebumps books? Just awesome. R.L. Stine, uh, the recipe he came up with for the Goosebumps books, and I wasn't a kid when I read a bunch of the Goosebumps books. I was working at a used bookstore on the weekends, my part time and stuff like that, and I would see the Goosebumps books being brought in by kids who read them, and they would trade the books in at the used bookstore. They would get a certain discount on purchases of other books, and they'd race over and get more books. And they loved the Goosebumps books by R.L. Stine. Of course, they made a television series. They made a movie out of it. He came up with Fear Street as an offshoot of his Goosebumps stuff for early teens, that sort of thing. And if you read these books, if you've read them for your kids or you got them for your kids and you checked them over, you know wonderful scary stories, terrific sort of Twilight Zone-y plots, in some cases takeoffs of sort of like the Monkey's Paw by W. W. Jacobs. A lot of terrific horror themes and so on in them. But they always had these really great realistic depictions of the usually brothers and sisters in the stories. How they sort of bickered, but that sort of thing. And he got it. And he was they're great. They're great books. And one of the curious things about the R.L. Stine Goosebumps books is that a lot of teachers, I ran into students. I got this firsthand from the students and the parents. The kids would come into the store and the mother would say, yeah, the teacher's not letting my son do a book report on this one, like Say Cheese and Die. It's about a camera where the kid takes a picture and you can tell who's going to die next from looking at the pictures. My Hairiest Adventure. That was a great one. That was such a great one. And if you read it, you know what I'm talking about. What a great story My Hairiest Adventure was. Pick it up. It's like 100-some pages. You could read it really quick. It's fun. It's really a great story. R.L. Stine was the man. And he wrote, they had like 50 of them. And he wrote all of those. I think later maybe he did like a Dixon thing for like, the Nancy Drew stories, that sort of thing, where they had like a team of people writing them. But I don't want to mislead anybody, and I certainly don't want to undercut Mr. Stine because he worked really hard and he was incredibly successful. But what I thought was really sad was the teachers wouldn't let the kids, and these were boys. Typically, the kids who were reading the Goosebumps books, I'd say 90% of them were boys. And I would talk to the parents, and I got a lot of really good feedback, and it was a consistent message that I got from the parents, which was, oh, my son really wasn't a reader until Goosebumps. And they would eat them up. It was like baseball cards from the 1970s, or those wacky packs or something like that, or like collecting early singles if you were into rock music. Like kids would try to beat each other to get them and read them. And these kids, I mean, literally, some of the kids were not into reading at all. One kid I remember meeting, he learned how to read so he could read the Goosebumps books, like comic books sort of thing. And the other thing was that I remember in one school, the librarian, they weren't carrying the Goosebumps books in the school library. Here again, you get the classic example of the tragedy of the commons. A lot of people who were in the know about Goosebumps knew that if they had those books in the school library, a lot more kids would have been reading them, right? But they didn't. They didn't put them in there. And librarians, oftentimes, if they saw the kids pulling the books in their free time, pulling the books out of their backpacks or their book bags, they would chastise them and say, don't read that. Go read something else. Amazing, it's just amazing. So here's the story about Goosebumps. As you might expect from the headline, Goosebumps author R.L. Stine says woke publisher edited his books without his knowledge. Amazing. So I guess he joins great company in Roald Dahl and in Ian Fleming, the author of the James Bond novels and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which, by the way, Roald Dahl turned into the screenplay. He was disappointed with the movie. And here it is. In the wake of the fury, this comes from Daily Wire. In the wake of the fury surrounding the woke alteration of famed author Roald Dahl's classic books, the author of the Goosebumps books, which trails only J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter book series in sales among children's books, pointed out that his publisher censored his work without his permission. Goosebumps author R.L. Stine reacted after the Times initially reported that he had joined Scholastic to edit his books as part of a 2018 ebook re-release, and over 100 edits had been made. The Times later corrected the error, acknowledging the books, quote, were changed without his knowledge. Boy, there's going to be a big suit if he wants it. The stories aren't true. I've never changed a word in Goosebumps. Any changes were never shown to me. Can you believe that? And again, I'm waiting on my novels to come out. I have 3 novellas, just turning the little space heater back on. I have 3 novellas that are out. As you know, I've got Bite, Wall, and Fishing. And they're actually all tied together, although you can't really tell in all of them. They're all tied to a larger mosaic that I'm creating, hopefully. And the novels that are coming out and a couple of the novellas that are coming out actually are connected to a lot of these things. And if a publisher, after all the work that you do with an editor to agree to things, I mean, we're talking whether or not it's going to be a hyphen or a comma, that sort of thing. I mean, really, really detailed stuff. I can't imagine being R.L. Stine and having all that work, and then all of a sudden, you've achieved so much. Ever since you were a kid, maybe you wanted to write stories, and then this happens. Gosh, he says, the stories aren't true. I've never changed a word in Goosebumps. Any changes were never shown to me, Stine replied when a reader deplored the changes. Scholastic issued a statement saying, quote, for more than 30 years, the Goosebumps series has brought millions of kids to reading through humor with just the right amount of scary. Scholastic takes its responsibility seriously to continue bringing this classic adolescent brand to each new generation. But the other shoe. They've got one shoe almost ready to drop. Here we go with the rest of it. When reissuing the titles several years ago, Scholastic reviewed the text to keep the language current and avoid imagery that could negatively impact a young person's view of themselves. So there you go, using the plural pronoun to mention a young person's view of themselves with a particular focus on mental health. Well, how about this? Since the books are designed to scare kids and excite them, you're already influencing their mental health. Why don't you leave this up to the parents and just stay out of it and not defraud the author and the people buying the books, especially later on if they're adults and they go back and purchase them for their kids, thinking they're getting the same books, or maybe just for themselves, thinking that they're getting the same books that they got, and they're not. Wow. Unbelievable. And here it is. I thought there were 50. There were 62 books published in this series. And the 2015 film starring Jack Black made $158 million at the box office. In the 1990s, the Goosebumps books sold roughly 4 million copies a month when they were at their hottest. The publisher of Roald Dahl, who wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, James and the Giant Peach, and the BFG, among other works, collaborated with the Roald Dahl Story Company, which manages the work's copyright and trademarks, to make hundreds of alterations in order not to offend anyone with Dahl's original works. Unbelievable. Just incredible. So appreciate the Daily Wire going into that. And now, everybody, we get to do a little music as we go into our next story. It's time for the guy I mentioned last night, one of the big guys responsible for rock and roll, none other than the king of the jukebox, Louis Jordan.